You don't fucking open this door or you're all getting shot!
I'm going somewhere.
Okay, how about this? Okay, I'll give you a small raise. Okay, a small raise. Just stop. Small raise.
5%, Captain. We get 5%.
3.5.
Captain.
3.5.
Don't get him out. You hear that,
As an established gaming journalist / talentless YouTuber schmuck, Barotrauma intimidates the hell out of me. Not because this 2D sci-fi horror submarine simulator features complex gameplay and a massive procedurally generated world, which it does, but because critiquing any game that's been out for 4 years and is already beloved by over 1 million people is scarier than some of the stuff you'll encounter in Barotrauma's abyss. But hey, ego is one hell of a drug, and I do have some strong feelings about this cult classic that I'm eager to share with you. So let's put survival instincts aside and see how Barotrauma holds up under my 15-part scoring system. Barotrauma takes place in the distant future on a not-so-distant celestial body, Europa, one of Jupiter's 92 moons and one that's theorized to contain massive deep-sea oceans buried under miles of ice. As mining these frigid alien seas for rare metals apparently wasn't an unsettling enough concept, Barotrauma's developers decided to add mud raptors, super squids, evil jellyfish, and worst of all, clowns to Europa for good measure. You and your up to 16-person crew of AI idiots or real-life idiots will no doubt die to each of these and more along the way, all while making a glorious mess of things during randomized mining, rescue, escort, and kill missions. But while there's plenty to hunt or be hunted by in Barotrauma, don't go in hunting for a story, as you won't really find one. Yes, there is a quote campaign mode, but it's really just a choose-your-own-adventure set of branching paths, and the variety of NPCs that you'll encounter scattered about Europa's many deep-sea stations do little more than distribute quests or supplies, and their text-based dialogue is nothing special. So instead of spoon-feeding you a story, Barotrauma invites you to create your own, but to do so you'll first need to get a feel for the game's quirky gameplay and content. Whether or not you complete Barotrauma's tutorial, during which you'll be introduced to each of the game's classes, your first playthrough is guaranteed to end in disaster. That's because Barotrauma is punishing, and small individual mistakes can and do frequently spiral into crew-wide annihilation.
They're on board the ship.
This said, the game's core gameplay dynamic is simple. You're assigned a class, captain, medic, mechanic, engineer, security guard, or assistant, each with a distinct role aboard the sub, and if you execute said role well, the sub will still sink because someone intentionally overloaded the reactor. This said, don't go into Barotrauma expecting immediate and consistent action. Like many simulators, Barotrauma is a game of prolonged maintenance that can border upon micromanagement monotony before it's punctuated by frantic, often hilarious spurts of chaos. So expect to spend most of your time crafting ammo, healing people who fall off ladders, welding leaks, and incorrectly wiring doors before hearing your frantic sonar-bound captain call out incoming enemies that you'll race to promptly pump full of lead.
Oh, we have incoming.
I'm giving Barotrauma's combat a strong 3 out of 5 as it's engaging if intentionally clunky. That's right, a consequence of the game's quirky ragdoll physics engine is frequently funny if often frustrating encounters against man and beast alike. The game's non-combat mechanics, meanwhile, strike a nice balance between immediate accessibility and surprising depth. You can provide undeniable value to a sub by just running around aimlessly with a welding tool, but only after numerous playthroughs will you start to feel like you're able to anticipate and even avoid disaster. A lot of your ability to do so will be dependent on your mastery of Barotrauma's UI, which is often so swarmed with elements as to feel as claustrophobic as is the sub itself. When in doubt, head to the command deck and exploit the sub's terminal, which can be used to locate any item. As for playability, Barotrauma has reached a relatively stable state at full release, and I'm only infrequently encountering framerate spikes and/or the odd server crash. However, some still argue that playing Barotrauma is a futile exercise because it's only a matter of time before griefers ruin the fun. Now that's true, but
Oh, someone thinks they're funny. They welded the door shut.
no, that's definitely true. Though Barotrauma sports a randomized world with a rival faction system and strange, often sinister points of interest, I can't deny feeling an overarching sense of sameness during each of my playthroughs. This is due in large and obvious part to the fact that you'll spend 95% of each run aboard a sub. And while each sub has a different layout and Barotrauma's submarine editor means you could play a different one each time, assuming you have the patience to properly wire all that shit together, the subs all ultimately consist of the same handful of key rooms, and you'll often face the same sort of problems during each journey. It doesn't help that most quests feel like permutations of each other. Deliver this, kill that, collect these, etc. And the game's few bosses, which you'll encounter in Barotrauma's Abyss, while visually imposing, are primarily challenging due to having bullet sponge levels of health.
I'm gonna press the nuke button. You need to get out of here, okay? Enjoy your life. Roger that.
So, while Barotrauma's unique gameplay and unhinged if hilarious community offer a lot to like, the game's value ultimately boils down to how hard you fall for its collaborative co-op storytelling. Emphasis on co-op, as the single-player mode is still far more frustrating than it is fun. The good news is that Barotrauma frequently goes on sale, and I highly recommend giving it a spin at a reduced price. Last and least, Barotrauma's visuals are charming and detailed as 2D artwork goes, but don't go in expecting much variety. The haunting electronic soundtrack, meanwhile, adds a layer of dread to the game's desolate atmosphere. But because voice chat takes priority during multiplayer, you'll often be forced to turn the soundtrack down if not muted outright. Finally, Barotrauma's sound design is solid if unremarkable, which I guess is about how I'd sum up this game as a whole. This said, I do feel like Barotrauma is worth more than the sum of these parts, and when everything goes right, or even better wrong, there's nothing quite like it.
3.5! Oh!
Until next time, this is Scope, and thanks for watching.